Hello and welcome to this month's Glow Heartfulness webinar. I'm Purnima, your host for today's webinar. I'm a heartfulness trainer and a practitioner of heartfulness meditation. Glow stands for Genuine Loving Outstanding Women. Today on the webinar, I welcome Chrysula Vinegar, Senior Communications Director with the United Nations Foundation. She's going to speak about the Sustainable Development Goal 3, which is health and well-being. So before we actually start the webinar, let me share a few things about the Heartfulness Institute, who are the host of the Glow webinars. Heartfulness meditation is available in 120 countries with thousands of volunteers and certified trainers in different parts of the world. Heartfulness Institute teaches heartfulness meditation to people all over the world through these workshops organized in corporates, schools, universities, and communities. We learn to meditate on the source of light in the heart which is the seat of love and joy. A special and unique feature of heartfulness meditation is to meditate in the presence of yogic transmission, or as they say, pranahuti, which is imparted by the guide. The Glow webinars is designed by women for the benefit of women, where we teach meditation for women through the comfort of their homes or at a click of a mouse button. So thank you for joining us, Chrysula.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So Chrysula is a Senior Communications Director at the United Nations Foundation, and she leads the New York office communications team, as well as special initiatives, including the Global Moms Challenge, Global Goals Week, and Social Good Summit. Previously, she founded the Wake Up World Communication, a digital communications agency focused on social action campaigns. She's worked in a variety of communication roles with organizations like Ernst & Young in London, ST Lauder Companies in New York, and the Australian Export and Finance Corporation in Sydney. She holds a Bachelor in Economics from the University of Queensland and an MSc in Organizational Behavior from the University of London. She is the mother of 4 children aged 17, 15, 13, and 10. Thank you so much for joining us once again, Chrysula. So let's begin the webinar today about the Sustainable Development Goal 3, which is health and well-being to all. So tell us a little bit about this challenge of mental health to begin with, and then the various ways the experts in the world, including the United Nations, combat this.
Purnima, thank you again for having me today, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are watching this webinar, and thank you so much for joining us in this really critical conversation. So maybe I could just take a step back first before I dive into mental health issues and talk about the Sustainable Development Goals overall. So back in 2015, all 193 member states of the United Nations came together around a global problem-solving agenda that all countries participated in formulating and coming up with evidence-based solutions on some of the key issues that are facing our planet. So the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as they're nicknamed, or global goals, all of those terms work. They mean the same thing. Is a framework of 17 different goals, of which health and wellness is one. That's goal 3. And health and well-being is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. And so I really love that as this goal is framed, that it's not just about health. It's not just about, do you have a particular disease that you're battling that is a clinical disease, or that you're battling with your heart, or you might be dealing with diabetes, or you might be coping with an infectious or tropical disease. But it's also about well-being. And so well-being opens the door within the health frameworks for us to really talk about the whole person and to do this at a worldwide level. Some of the other goals, and there's a lot of intersection points, right, between these goals. They don't all just sit in isolation. So goal 5, for example, is around gender and equality issues facing girls and women. Goal 10 is around reducing inequalities, which tackles vulnerable populations, those with physical disabilities, those dealing with discrimination, and so it also deals with the legal frameworks. Peace and security around Goal 16, justice, access to safe legal systems where individual problems are recognized, and of course, throughout the entire Sustainable Development Goal agenda is the drumbeat of tackling climate and protecting our planet. Goal 13, which is around tackling climate change, goals around life on water, life on land, really looking at the planet as a whole and infusing sustainability throughout the entire agenda. There are goals around access to good jobs, but there's also goals around responsible consumption, and how we think about what we consume and the resources that we use. So with that framework in the back of our minds, knowing that countries have come together, that governments have collectively said there's a plan and there's a pathway that we can take as a world to be able to face these issues head on and tackle them. Let's dive in a little bit to Goal 3. So I am actually so excited around the opportunity to have more and more frank conversations around mental health and mental well-being. This has been too long a stigmatized issue, too long where we treat mental wellness as sort of something that we are very quiet about and that we bury over to the side. And so the opportunity to, within this SDG framework, to really tackle our mental and emotional well-being as much and value it as much as we value our physical well-being is really critical. You know, there are 300 million people around the world, according to the World Health Organization, or WHO, and we'll reference WHO a few times throughout our conversation, that suffer from depression. And depression is really one of the most critical factors in the many hundreds of thousands of suicides that happen around the world. And so, you know, this is a really critical conversation. The WHO said that in 2016 there were 800,000 suicides, and so mental well-being is something that is a planetary crisis, and we need to tackle it. There's a lot being done. So the WHO, World Health Organization, has come out with a framework and a plan for tackling mental wellness. There are a lot of factors in a person's overall mental and emotional health. So you could be dealing with a country that's been in conflict, which obviously affects many, many countries around the world, and the kinds of generational emotional crises that sit within a country when there have been many, many cycles of conflict and war. You've got the very basic and all too common issues around gender-based violence, for example, and so domestic violence issues, where there can be enormous psychological as well as the obvious physical damage. There can be obviously genetic issues where we carry different diseases, mental diseases and conditions within our DNA. And so there are a variety of factors, both physical and sort of contextual, around what might be going on in your life or in your community or in your country, and then genetic, and sort of bringing all of those things together. So this is something that, to some degree or another, whether we realize it or not, we all face. We all face anxieties. We all, at some point, have a day where we feel blue. You know, in English, it's you feeling blue. That's the code word. But we all get sad. We all get into a state where we're not as sparkly and as optimistic, and then for some of us that becomes something much more serious. And it is an, you know, by those numbers alone, we can see that it's an overwhelming issue. So, you know, there's a number of ways that different organizations, but, you know, obviously from the UN perspective, the WHO is really the global authority on these different perspectives. They're looking at ways to tackle early childhood interventions. They're looking at lots of sort of skills programs for children. Obviously, poverty is a big factor in mental wellness. And so even tackling economic programs that tackle poverty eradication are impactful on supporting mental health. There's programs at targeting at the most vulnerable populations in the world: minorities, indigenous people, migrants, people, as I said, affected by conflicts and disasters. Really sort of building programs that provide psychological interventions after disasters. Talking about mental health and mental wellness in schools. That's a critical part of the action plan. Stress prevention programs at work that and help people navigate housing improvement policies, and community development programs, particularly around rural areas where people can be really far away from the help that they might need. And that actually plays into one of the case studies that we're going to talk about in a little minute. And then the protection of rights and providing actual care for those who have mental disorders. So I'll stop there on the solutions front. There's many ways that we know that we can tackle as communities, as societies, as families, and as countries, that we can tackle better mental health policies and protect each other and take care of each other. But Pranima, I'll stop there to see what your next question might be.
Okay, thank you so much, Priscilla, for the comprehensive explanation about all the SDGs, especially related to mental health. Excuse me. So today's webinar topic is how can grandmothers play a significant role in treating depression? How can they help in mental health challenges? My first question was, why resort to other people who are not traditional caretakers like doctors or counselors or psychiatrists? Why are we talking about grandmothers, especially in this context?
So I'm so glad that you decided that this would be the topic that we wanted to tackle today. And I love this idea. You sent me a quotation, which I loved, an Italian proverb: if nothing is going well, call your grandmother. And it resonated so deeply with me. And what's interesting for me about this, Pranima, is that I don't have a grandmother. Both of my grandmothers died before I was born. My mother's mother died when she was 18. And my father's mother died when he was in his very early 20s. And that has been a huge loss for me. It's something that I have looked at through my life and felt a real sense of loss that I did not have those two women active in my life. And even though I live far away from my own mother, and we also live far away from my husband's mother, we've worked really hard to give our children access to those relationships. And in fact, my kids have just come back from 3 weeks out with Warren, my husband's mother. And I can already see the strengthening in them as human beings from having that time with her, and the safe place that she provides them. And so I just think that this is a really powerful concept. And it's this idea that, when many of us now in the modern world, we move away from our families are far away geographically and physically, and we don't have that same opportunity to just pop around to the house and have a cup of tea and talk through our problems and get that sense of intergenerational wisdom shared. So this story that we're going to talk about in a little minute is it's a really powerful intersection of all of that. So I met a man last year named Dr. Dixon Chibanda, and he's based out of Zimbabwe. And at the time when he was early in his practice as a doctor, he was really drawn to mental wellness for a variety of factors. He had a couple of patients that he deeply cared about who committed suicide, and he felt incredibly hopeless and helpless at that time. And so he deepened his studies of psychiatry, and he became Zimbabwe's only psychiatrist operating in the public sector. Now, this is an environment that has had multiple conflicts. So you're talking about many generations of surviving war and surviving poverty, and the HIV crisis, which has decimated that country as well as many others in sub-Saharan Africa. Tuberculosis, which often is sort of paired quite heavily with HIV epidemics. And so there are a number of factors at play here in creating a mental health crisis. And then you add to that the fact that there aren't the professionals available or trained to tackle this. You know, recent data I saw said that there were approximately one psychiatrist for every 1.5 million people in Zimbabwe. You know, but even in a city like New York City, where there's one for every 6,000 people, it's still almost impossible to get to everyone who needs help. And so Dixon came up with a really fascinating idea to tap into this idea, this concept of generational wisdom. The hospital that he was operating at, not all the nurses were just crazily busy with HIV cases. But the hospital said, well, we've got these 14 grandmothers. He's like, what? We've got these 14 grandmothers and we can give you some space outdoors. That's what we've got for you. And so, you know, he often has joked, he's like, people think I'm a genius for coming up with this idea. I didn't really come up with it. It was more that it was just needs must, you know, it was the mother of necessity. Invention is the mother of necessity. And so creatively, he and the grandmothers got together. They came up with this idea of what has been called a friendship bench. And they put benches outside on the hospital grounds, and the grandmothers took shifts to counsel with people. And they set these spaces up that were safe spaces, and individuals in crisis, to whatever degree, could come and sit on a friendship bench, and a grandmother would hear them, would listen to them, and would counsel with them. And he said something really interesting. He said, you know, initially he was trying to use the language of suicidal ideation and, you know, proper medical terms around mental illness. And what these women taught him was that he's like, they were saying, you've got to use the language of the people. This particular community is largely from the Shona tribe and the Shona language in the southern part of the African continent. And so they were also able to tap into indigenous wisdom and use language that would make sense from a tribal context around openness, around sharing. And so the grandmothers were able to create a real fusion of the medical training that they were given, which was pretty basic, and then also their indigenous wisdom, and bring these things together. And I think that that's a really powerful model for any sort of medical approach, right? That we need to, as a society, bridge that indigenous wisdom and the scientific knowledge that we've developed over the last few hundred years and bring those together. And that's when we get to a really powerful place.
As grandmothers, with their age, you know, they are pretty old themselves because they're grandmothers. And how do they not get burnt out? How do they feel that strength, mental strength and physical strength? And how do they keep on doing this day in and day out and feel the zest and continue to do it?
So, you know, just to be clear, I'm a storyteller and a communications person, not an expert. So I'm referring to Dr. Tabanda's study and citing his work, not mine. But the work that he has done, he's been able to provide multiple studies now that have sort of tested whether this really works, right? So, citing from his studies, he's been asked that question, and it's really interesting because the response has been unbelievably clear that these women don't burn out, and they're very resilient. And so what they seem to have identified is a real sense of that the women find a real sense of altruism and purpose and value this need that the community has of them. And so it just enables them to kind of show up day after day and take on these stories that they hear. One of the methodological approach is that many of the women talk about is not so much that they're solving anyone's problems, and they don't take on individuals' problems who are suffering. They just provide a safe space to listen. And so they're, I think, pretty careful about not taking on those burdens onto themselves, but providing this opportunity to just allow people to be heard and then be mentored into coming up with their own solutions. So that's really powerful. And, you know, but I love this driving sense of altruism, of feeling needed, of feeling that what they're doing is a profound way of giving to the community and that they're needed. I think human beings love to be needed. We all have this value in being needed, and these women just kind of do it on the next level. It's just really extraordinary.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful that you say that altruism is what drives them, and to feel that sense of contentment, to feel that sense of purpose in one's life is really wonderful and amazing. Thank you for that response. So coming to my next question um, about this methodology, how scientifically proven is this, and is there a case study? Has this been clinically proven? This methodology.
Yeah, so I mentioned a couple of case studies that have been already taken place, and there's more research underway to validate these results. And they were able to do various controls of splitting groups who were receiving one set of care and another group who were receiving support from the grandmothers on the friendship bench. And they were able to show, I mean, you know, very clearly that those working with the grandmothers had significantly lower symptoms of depression after their 6-month period. So there are multiple studies going on in other countries and through other health systems as well. So it's been validated in multiple frameworks and ways in different countries, and is continuing to be so. So that's really exciting. Again, to have that clarity around this really innovative and yet so simple approach. You know, when you think about it, you're like, oh, of course this would work. But yes, it is being tested and is proving to be
Okay,
really effective.
that's interesting. That's really amazing and interesting. So you were mentioning the statistics in Zimbabwe, which is understandable. But I was so surprised and shocked when you say even the statistics in New York is just 1 in 6,000. There is one professional mental health expert for catering to 6,000 patients, which is so alarming. Because America is one country which is looked upon as the most developed country in the world. And I was just wondering, has this program expanded to other countries? And is there a possibility it has also probably expanded to USA?
Yes, absolutely. So I know that there are some other countries that are being expanded to, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. Malawi comes to mind as kind of where I know there's been some really successful programs built. And yes, the Friendship Bench has come to even New York City. So I don't know the scale of sort of outside of New York, but I do know that there are a few benches here in New York, which is where I'm based, and there've been a few sort of piloted in Brooklyn and Harlem, and I think that's just really wonderful. And so they've had, I think in New York City, this might be a few months old, but the last data that I saw, there were like 30,000 people that had visited these benches since they've been installed and counseled with. And in New York, it's not just grandmothers, it's grandfathers and different representations of people coming from different sorts of communities. But they're definitely considered sort of elder members of the community who bring wisdom and insight into particular issues. There are a lot of LGBTQ issues and other vulnerabilities that members of the community face here that they want to go and counsel with and talk to someone about that are affecting their approach to mental wellness.
That's so amazing. That's so amazing that it's expanding in a lot of countries, and it's also expanding to encompass a lot of different cases, and a lot of caregivers are joining us, grandpas and others. So that's so amazing and so inspiring. So this is one interesting asset we have to handle mental health challenges. Can you also tell us what are the different ways we can treat mental health challenges in the absence of trained personnel, like grandmas and grandpas. And if we have any other resources, it would be interesting to take note of.
Yeah, so I mean, I think first of all, and I think this is where we started our conversation, Purnima, transparency is such a valuable tool here. And then can be really open about what our own journey is. You know, I I have multiple members of my family that struggle with depression. I have, on my husband's side of the family, there's some history of schizophrenia, and there's some history of bipolar disorder. And it's been really liberating to just be super matter of fact about that. It's just the same as grandpa's heart condition, right? Like, so there's an element here where I think all of us can help the conversation by just being really open about what we navigate. I deal with anxiety. This is new for me. It's only happened in the last few years, but this has been something that I've had to get some support and help with. And you know what? I'm so grateful. I live in an age and a time where there are tools available to me, whether that's traditional talk therapy, and I'm a huge fan of therapy. I think everyone at some point in their life needs to go and see a therapist. I think if you find the right one, it's a very, very powerful tool. And I have medication available to me if I need it, and that's really powerful, and I'm so grateful for that. And then I think there are ways to just also find stillness through either your own religious traditions or spiritual practices, to ground ourselves, to find stillness in our lives. I think so much of what we deal with is because we're just so busy and frenetic, and we're just powering through life and not taking that step back. And I think so we could talk a little bit more about the individual things that we can do, the things we can do but we also need systemic changes. So I don't want to give the system a pass, right? We need our governments and our ministries of health to step up and really, because this stuff costs money. It's expensive. Therapy is expensive. It's expensive in every country in the world. There aren't enough trained professionals in every country in the world, and particularly in the world's poorest countries. And so we've got to be able to agitate for more Ministry of Health support in countries around the world, for programs, for school programs, for hospital programs, for community-based programs, for expanding this kind of model of the friendship bench, for example, that can be so powerful. But that model needs to be supported. The grandmothers can't just do it in isolation. They need to be working with professionals, and they need that sort of dovetailed approach. It's got to be together. So we've got to agitate for change. We've got to also talk to our own providers in our own communities and really push for better access to mental health support structures in our systems and our societies. Having said all of that, we also do need to take ownership of what we can on a personal level. And I think part of that is just community care, of watching out for each other, right? Because if you've got a friend who's in a spiral of depression, or a member of your family who's really struggling with high levels of anxiety, they can't get help by themselves because they're just maybe not in the right headspace to see what their solutions might be, right? So we need to be there for each other as communities. We need to be paying attention. We need to notice each other. And we need to notice when somebody might seem like they're struggling, even if they don't know how to articulate it and share what they're going through. It's scary stuff to say, I'm a mess and I can't get out of bed. It's scary stuff to say, I'm terrified of every little thing in my life and I'm just really struggling and panicking about everything. It's hard to say those things out loud. And then from there to proceed to step A, B, C, D, E of what kind of support will help solve those issues, right? So we've got to care for each other. We've got to watch out for each other. We've got to flag where the people close to us are going to need help, and we've got to help them get it. And so that requires compassion. It requires noticing. It requires observation. It requires action on our part. And then I think the other thing that the other responsibility that we all have as individuals is to create stillness in our lives where we can breathe and we can think and we can get clarity and we can calm the world down for ourselves so that we can then make better decisions and better choices. And really, Pranima, I would kind of hand that piece back to you because you're the expert here on how we can do that. But I find great power in prayer and meditation to help still myself. These are my personal approaches, and everyone's is different. And but there is some really significant evidence in the health literature that meditation, for example, can have enormous benefits in our mental wellness and well-being, which is why I wanted to meditate with you today. So back to you.
Thank you so much, Chrysula. We all need that space of stillness within us to help calm the world around us. Is really, it rang a bell, because if I'm able to calm myself down, I'm able to calm my surroundings down. As you said, relaxation and meditation is proven to treat and regulate feelings of depression and mental health challenges. If the participants here would like to avail experiential session of relaxation and meditation, let's begin this now. So let's begin this session of relaxation and meditation, and let's meditate together. I'll first take you through a few relaxation commands, and then we'll slip into meditation for a few minutes. So close your eyes, sit comfortably. Let's begin from the toes. Wiggle your toes, relax them, relax your feet. Feel an energy from Mother Earth rising up through your legs, relaxing your legs, relaxing your thighs. This energy is rising up, relaxing your hips, gently feel your stomach relaxing. Your lower back is getting relaxed now, and this energy is moving up through your upper back, relaxing your upper back. Relax your chest, shoulders, and as this energy moves through your arms, it relaxes your arms. It relaxes your elbows, wrist, palm, fingers. To the tip of your fingers, your arms are entirely relaxed. Feel this energy relaxing your neck. There are no tension in any part of the muscles in your neck. All the muscles in your neck are completely relaxed now. Bring your attention to your head, and all the muscles in your head are relaxing. Your lips, your chin, cheeks, ears, nose, forehead, till the tip of your head. All parts of your head are completely relaxed. Bring your attention to the heart. Feel the presence of light, the source of light and love in your heart. And let's meditate on this light in the heart. This light is pulling us deep within, and we are drawn deep into meditation. If any other thoughts interrupt us, gently brush them aside and bring your attention back to the light in the heart. Let's meditate together like this for a few minutes. Gently open your eyes when you're ready. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm sure the participants have benefited by this meditation. And if you would like to continue, or if you would like to avail a certified trainer services in one of the Heartfulness centers, you're welcome to check out heartspots.heartfulness.org, or you can write an email to info@heartfulness.org and they'll put you in touch with a trainer. If you have any more questions about mental health, about this amazing case study of grandmothers helping in treating depression, please write to us at glow@heartfulness.org. I repeat, GLOW, glow@heartfulness.org. And Priscilla would answer all your questions.
I'll do my very best.
Sorry?
I said I'll do my very best. And if you'd like to know more about issues facing mothers and children around the world, please come to globalmomschallenge.org. That's global, GLOBAL, moms, MOMS, challenge, CHALLENGE.org. And you'll find a number of stories and articles just around some of the biggest issues facing women and children in the world today.
Thank you so much. So thanks to all the participants for joining us today. And I hope it was a very useful and beneficial webinar, both in terms of understanding this important aspect and in terms of the experience of meditation. And we are all grateful to have had this interesting time with Crisula. Thank you so much, Crisula, for being here with us. Are there any closing comments which you would like to share?
Just that we're in this together and we need to take care of each other. We need to watch out for each other and we need to find ways to agitate for support. So please fight for the mental wellness of yourself and for those around you, both at an individual level, but then also at a community and a government level.
Thank you so much.